say yes. Today's episode is all about branching out into new areas, not being scared, and getting it done. We've got a special guest, Mr. Jason Scott from Coffee Crafters and Hermetheus Coffee. A very interesting discussion. This company, Coffee Crafters, which coincidentally makes the machine that we roast Ignis Lux on, penetrated into a market space that is very hard to get into, big legacy companies, and they're doing a great job using a made in America product. Let's dig right in with Mr. Jason Scott. Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Hey all, welcome to yet another episode of the Higher Line podcast. We've got a special guest. They're all special, but this one I actually do some work with indirectly for the last few years with our coffee business, which today I'm in the front showroom at the roastery, and I thought this would be a fitting spot to introduce you to. Are you now the new owner of Coffee Crafters?
That is correct. Yes.
And also Hermetheus?
Yes, Hermetheus Coffee, a roastery and coffee shop in the Kansas City area.
Okay, so not only do you now own the business that builds coffee roasting equipment, but you own a coffee roastery.
That's correct.
And then you also make software that helps run these pieces of equipment?
Close. I make hardware.
Hardware,
that uses existing open source roasting software.
And you are Mr. Jason Scott.
You got it.
Very cool. So I actually had intended to do this some time ago. You and I talked about that a little bit, and we never got it done. So I'm glad that we are here today. Coffee is like the number 2 most traded commodity on planet Earth, I believe. Does that sound right?
It sounds about right to me, yes.
So like, I don't know how many billions of people now drink coffee every day. So there's a good chance that you guys listening that dig coffee are going to learn some stuff today. So we could talk about a million topics. Let's start with this. You own a coffee shop, you just said.
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit. What got you into that, and we'll kind of branch off from there into coffee roasting and some of the other cool stuff you do.
Sure. The coffee shop was new. So it's new for us this year, just opened in February. And in fact, the coffee shop is something that I long swore that I would never do, because having a coffee shop is an entirely different business model from a roastery.
Sure.
Very, very hands off, very few people involved with the roastery. And I wasn't wanting to take on staffing, payroll, scheduling, inventory management. It's just an entirely different world. You're in the hospitality.
Somebody plugged up the toilet again.
Yeah. So that was never on the radar. And then we just had a really unique opportunity where our city came to us and said, "Hey, we love your coffee. We'd love to have you open a shop in." They built a brand new library, multi-story library, gorgeous facility. And they built an entire place to have a little cafe in it. And they said, "We'd love for you to move into that cafe and interact with the community there." And it aligned. And so we made it happen in pretty short order. Probably less than 8 weeks from the initial, "Hey, I have something to talk to you about," to the day that we opened. So it was a really fast timeline, but we got it done. And so we're, the first few months we were drinking from a fire hose, and I feel like now, 6 months into opening, we're just now starting to get a feel for how things run on a week-to-week basis. But it was never a part of the original plan. In hindsight, I'm glad that we did it. Can't wait to open more.
That's cool. Oh, so you're going to open more. So now you've got a taste for it. Now you're going to have citywide, then nationwide Hermetheus coffee shops.
That's not the plan. But of course, the coffee shop was never the plan. So I never say never. I just say it's not the plan.
I like it. It's interesting. It seems like anywhere I go. So I've got my nephew and I, Bennett. We travel around the country for the other business, the training business, and we've got a spreadsheet that we started years ago of places to get a steak, places to find a nice dinner or lunch, because we're just always on the roads and it's hard to find good food. And we started logging coffee shops. And we started listing things like who's got the best breakfast sandwich or who's got like fresh bread or whatever. There are so many freaking coffee shops, and the good ones always seem jammed. People love coffee.
Yeah, that's correct. And we're slightly different because when anytime we are in a library, so we are an ancillary to the main reason that people are in that building.
Mm.
And anytime you're an ancillary, you're not on the same operating rules as a traditional coffee shop. So you don't have direct control over the aesthetic, over the parking, over the hours even. Like I don't get to choose the hours that I'm open. Um, so for instance, the library doesn't open until 9 a.m. You've already missed your prime rush on a coffee shop. So it's not comparable to a traditional coffee shop in that realm. And for that reason, I think some people who first come in, they see kind of the coffee shop in the corner of a library and they really lower their expectations. They're thinking, this will be like an airport kiosk, cup of coffee or something. And that's not at all the case. Obviously, we roast coffee. We've done that for years. We have exceptional coffee and we have all traditional equipment that we dial in. So we use gram scales for our shots that we pull. And we dial that in throughout the day. So we're always measuring down to the milliliter and gram to make sure that every espresso shot is perfect. We go for perfect milk texture. So we really get back to the basics of what makes a fantastic cup of coffee that you would find at those really packed coffee shops. And yet we're in the corner of a library. So when people have never even heard of us and they come in and they're expecting something maybe middle of the road, it's fun to see them blown away. Like, this is the best coffee I've ever had. Like, who are you guys? So that's just fun to see that light come on.
I like that. So, one end of the spectrum, uh, you're now selling to the end consumer, paper cup, whatever. They get to taste the product. The other end's the farm somewhere in some far-flung place. The roasting is kind of the middle point, right? How did you get into that?
Yeah, roasting. Short answer, hobby that grew out of control. Like, I mean, that's how a lot of businesses start, right? You fall in love with something, specialty coffee. That progressed to espresso, which takes it to the next level. And then, yeah, I had a friend that said, the next level here is roasting your own coffee. And as often happens, I say, nope, nope, I'm never getting into that side of it. He said, I've got a little tabletop coffee roaster. It's a Be-More. And tons of people cut their teeth on this little Be-More. You can plug it into a standard household outlet. You could do it on your cooktop, right? Just run the exhaust fan there. And they're fine. I mean, they do fine coffee. It's not like world-class coffee, but even with that okay, but not great Be-More, I mean, the light came on for me. And I said, whoa, this is something entirely new. In hindsight, what it really came down to is when you're buying coffee off the shelf, the bean often isn't the greatest bean, like the origin or the selection of that bean. And so with that Be-More, what I learned is that if you buy a really great green coffee bean, in a way, you actually have to work to ruin it. Like you have to go out of your way to make it something that isn't good. And so, like I was actually just tasting a fantastic green coffee bean selection. It was an Ethiopian. It was a naturally processed, and even in that drum roaster that didn't have great control, you could get those notes of blueberry. And I was tasting things that I had never tasted before. And so I said, I've got to have more of this. There's got to be more in this bean that could be unlocked. And so then the floodgates opened, and and here I am.
And that's an interesting point. I think we coffee space is fun in the sense it's kind of like wine or beer. It's like a lot of things where people that are super nerdy about it overcomplicate stuff. I like to cook. Once upon a time, I was going to go to culinary school. I think I told you this. I've got friends that are professional chefs. In fact, I got a buddy that's won like the James Beard Award and cool things like that, which doesn't mean I know anything. But people take this idea of cooking this little seed and make it so damn complicated, which it can be, and you can ruin things. But I mean, you're really just like making popcorn, right? In a sense.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to oversimplify it or take anything away from the skill to create a product that has consistency. But how did you decide to go from cooking stuff on your tabletop to actually running a business roasting coffee? And what's that look like?
Yeah, it was really it was it started as the hobby. So when I tasted those first flavor notes of blueberry and knew that okay, this roasting thing is actually really cool, then that came down to researching roasters. So what is the next step up from um, from the little tabletop roaster? Like what is a true commercial coffee roaster? And so I actually cut my teeth on a 2 kilogram commercial gas fired drum roaster. And so I learned to roast on a drum roaster, and then which you can visualize that as like a clothes dryer almost, right? There is a drum that rotates, and you have your coffee beans in there, almost like you have clothes in a dryer, and that drum spins and it's heated, and the beans heat up. And what I ultimately landed on after that was an air roaster, which uses a stream of hot air. So if you can visualize an old air popcorn popper, magnify that, to a much larger capacity. It's the exact same concept. You have a jet of hot air that's levitating and blowing these coffee beans, since you're heating the beans with pure convection. So there was a progression. You can roast exceptional coffee on either one. At the end of the day, I find that it's much easier to roast exceptional coffee on a fluid bed air coffee roaster. So that's where I kind of found my home years ago, and just started creating products and software and little robotic devices to automate it and make it more consistent from there. So yeah,
Which
hobby that grows out of control.
that is what Coffee Crafters does, is builds fluid bed roasting machines. Go back a second though. So you got a background in robotics and building controls and automation. How did you have the skills and know how to do that stuff?
Yeah, I have a diverse background. Like right out of college, I was a school teacher. So
Oh, cool.
so yeah, so I love and that was sixth grade, so you're middle schoolers, and so you're kind of at the age where you're taking sometimes more complex scientific principles, and you're trying to distill it down to something that's relatable and understandable. Still love that, but when I left teaching in the late '90s, got an IT master's degree, and then for the last 25 years have really lived in the IT realm. So application development, website development. But as a part of that, my professional career took me to um, oil refineries throughout the Midwest and working on industrial control systems. So you learn PLC logic, and all of that translates into what we do on the coffee roaster side. And at the end of the day, you can have really complex systems, but those complex systems are still controlled by very simple things. At the end of the day, it's often still just a valve that turns on or off, or varies a little bit. And the complexity just has to do with the timing and control of those various aspects. And so it's,
When do I turn on and off, and how far do I open or close?
yeah, yep, that's exactly it. And so when that light bulb came on, that wow, when we visualize a really complex system, the system itself can be complex, but the individual steps of that system are rarely as complex as you might think that they are.
Hmm. I dig that. I used to do some work with companies like Honeywell and like the old dial thermostats that we had on all of our homes as children. Even these super complicated computer controlled thermostats still come down to something measuring the temperature and telling all of these heating and cooling controls what to do. So I kind of
Yep.
understand what you're saying. So
Yep. You got it.
we use Coffee Crafters equipment, and I'd like to talk a little bit so people understand kind of what you just said helps maybe move the conversation in that direction. So years ago, I think beer or wine is a great example. As I said earlier, I've got a friend, we just lost him. His name was Kirk. Kirk was a wine maker, a grape grower, and he did it by feel And then he did it with the math and the science part of it, which you could replicate if you had testing equipment. And kind of like you, I don't know if you're a beer drinker, but you can go anywhere now and drink an IPA and it almost tastes the same, like across America. Like if it's the same alcohol content and like the same style, like it's like, okay, this tastes like the same lager or same porter that I drink anywhere. And we're starting to kind of see that with some coffees because it's like it's become so formulaic rather than some artisan in a back room, just feeling it. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And interesting that you say that because before Hermetheus Coffee, the plan was to open a brewery. So I was a craft beer brewer for many years.
Oh, cool, man.
And so like a brewery was going to be the manifestation of all of that. And then all that changed like 2018, where I just kind of took all that energy and pushed it into coffee. So great analogy. And they're both perfectly adept. I do agree with you that a good IPA can seem very similar.
And
Whoever,
I'm
whoever,
not saying you go to anywhere and you drink it and you're like, okay, it's the exact same as the one that I drunk in Florida versus Pennsylvania, but it used to be like this big, vast difference in beers, and it's almost like guys are just tasting it and going, okay, people really love Revolution Anti-Hero when that was like a microbrew, and now you can find 100 beers that taste just like it. That's kind of what I'm
yeah,
saying. Sorry to
yeah, no,
interrupt you.
it's good as a coffee roaster. I don't think we should take nearly as much credit for a great cup of coffee as we might want to take, because I think the majority of what we do came from the farm. So if you start out with a bad bean or even a mediocre bean, there is nothing we can do to make that an exceptional bean. So really, I think my approach to roasting is my job as a roaster is to start with a fantastic bean and don't mess it up. Find a profile that brings out the best parts of that bean and mutes the things that we don't want. And so that's really what it comes down to. So for instance, like if you have a naturally processed Ethiopian coffee, that might have some notes of fruits or blueberries or something like that. And so the worst thing you could do is to turn that into a really dark roast, because you're gonna burn off or bake off all of
Kill
those
all of those fruity
nuanced.
bits.
Yeah, that's right. And then what I find with so I've got a Papua New Guinea that I absolutely love and adore. But if you try going too light on this particular Papua New Guinea, it has this sharp, almost vegetal quality to it. Think a cucumber or green pepper note to it. So you actually have to take it a little bit darker in the spectrum to mute those undesirable notes, and then it brings out it caramelizes some of the sugars that are in there, and it brings out this almost a malted barley or molasses like character to it. So yeah, your job, you're not creating those flavor notes. You are merely bringing them out. So we have a diminished impact on the bean. It's either in the bean or it's not. And our job is to protect what is there that we like.
I like that. That's a nice way of putting it. You c- it I used to work with a guy, professional chef, that talked about cooking with wines, and he would say things like never pour it into the dish if you wouldn't pour it in a glass and drink it. Like you got to start out with something good, unless you're, just making some dirty ass stew or something. But
Yeah, yeah.
that's a super interesting point. It seems like that there's this trend, right? Starbucks came around when you and I were young. You go to the diner and get a cup of whatever pre-ground, mass-produced coffee was available, and that was coffee. Then you have this explosion in the 90s where Starbucks like kind of takes over the world. There was a little coffee shop in the town I grew up in. I think it was there long before it was there long before any Starbucks, probably 92, 93, something like that. It was called To a T. It was delicious coffee. And I don't know where they got any of their stuff, but that was like people started seeing all of these fancy machines that sprayed steam out and stuff. But it everything got like as dark as possible. That's where I was going. We just roast everything till it's the color of our microphones, and like that's great coffee. And
Yeah.
I have friends, most of our stuff is roasted on the lighter side of the spectrum, but I have friends that like I will purposely, I say, destroy a batch, and I'll make a little handwritten label, Bob's destroyed batch, and I send it to him because he wants it that way. What trends have you seen, and why? Why do you think they change?
Yeah. Well, how far back do you want to go? Are you talking like trends within the last 10 years?
I
Or
guess
trends
I
that
wasn't
started in the
around
90s?
during the Civil War, so I can't go that far.
Well, what I mean by that, you are correct. Starbucks ushered in a whole uh, new concept of coffee to the general American public, and that's just a really sweet, sugary latte at the end of the day, right? So, like when you, I think when most people think of Starbucks, they don't think of a pour over. They think of a caramel macchiato with whipped cream and all that stuff on it. So if there is a common complaint that you might hear about some of those chains, it is that their coffee tastes burnt or bitter or something like that. And that's not because, well, this is my take. I don't have inside information on this. It's not that I don't think they know what they're doing. I think they know exactly what they're doing. And I think they know their consumer. So they know that their consumer tends to put a lot of sugar and milk products in that. And so your coffee needs to have enough oomph to punch through that. So how do you kind of create that coffee punch that can punch through all the sugar and milk? You go really dark with it.
Hmm.
And so then you've got this intense, burnt flavor, and it can punch through all that. And wow, this is something that I've never tasted. Uh, sometime let's say 2010, around that, you kind of got the next wave of coffee, which were more of the lighter roasts, and so if Starbucks brought espresso to the mainstream, after that came more light roasts and these third wave coffee shops that could bring light roasts and these hints of fruitiness and the nuance of the bean itself into the general public. And we've been there for over 10 years now. So it's
Sure.
nothing new at this point. People are asking what comes after that, and it probably isn't a flavor profile or anything. It's knowledge and understanding of the sourcing of those coffee beans and how delicate that ecosystem is, and
Hmm.
and maybe being more intentional about how fragile that whole ecosystem is, both from a business and sustainability standpoint, as well as just um, environmental factors. So
Hmm.
Brazil had like this generational drought last year, like literally a once in a generation drought, and it
Drove the costs.
drove their costs through the roof. So the fear, and everyone is kind of holding their breath. It was this truly a one-time generational thing, or is this a sign of, man, we might have less moisture, we might have hotter temperatures on a sustained level. So yeah, everyone is just kind of standing back to see what we're up against. There are things, some things that we can't control, like that. And then there are other things that we can control, which is it economically viable for a farmer to continue selling their coffee beans? And we have to make sure that it is, because if you look at who is making money in the coffee chain, the farmer is usually at the bottom end of that totem pole.
Mm.
And you can't just, it might be a bit like wine. You can't just plant a vineyard and then get wine the next year. It takes years to get a
Hmm.
fruit that is viable, and a coffee farm is no different. So if a coffee farm shuts down because it's not economically viable, because maybe they had one bad year, and so their buyer just goes somewhere else, that's catastrophic to that farm. So if it closes down, it's not a matter of just buying that farm in a year and spinning up production. You can't do that. It's going to take years to bring that back. And so then you're looking for someone who is willing to invest years to bring something back to health that can produce a viable bean again. So it's a really delicate structure on the coffee production side of it.
That's an interesting conversation piece. The not just the environmental factor, but these farmers. I visited farms. Uh, you can look at the cacao space. That's a similar kind of a situation where the people that are actually out harvesting this stuff get paid not even pennies, fractions of pennies compared to what the end user uh, or the end producers, the chocolate makers and such, are making. And it's begs a lot of questions beyond just economics. It begs some humanitarian questions like what are we as a consumer doing? But at the end of the day, the guy that goes and buys his cup of coffee and goes, geez, $6 for a cup of coffee or $8 or $20 for a bag of coffee. That's crazy. How much more can I put into it? I mean, you just said it as this drought popped off. Like I was looking at the cost we were paying per pound for some of our basic beans and stuff went up 20, 30% overnight. And you can't just immediately pass that on to the end consumer because they'll go, what the hell? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 20, 30% overnight. My Brazil beans have gone up 100% over the last 12 months. So if I
Mm-hmm.
look at what I paid for the exact same bean 12 months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and the and it came in waves, it came in those 20 to 30% waves.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know of another business that could absorb a 100% increase on cost of goods without raising their prices. And I haven't yet, but I have to. I mean, I am now, it's imminent. Everything gets a little tighter and you can only squeeze so much profit out of it. So yeah, and you hit on the ultimate question. How much is the consumer willing to bear for that? And I think if we I think maybe we're overdue for a reset in that space, America in general. So you roast specialty coffee, right? It's the top 10% of coffee beans. Specialty coffee, it's not just this generic term. It is a classification of coffee. And by definition, it's only the top 10% of beans in the world. And yet we almost treat it as a commodity in the United States. It's not just 10% of our population that is drinking specialty grade coffee. And so we've got this imbalanced equation in the United States. And so I think it might not even be a terrible thing if we as roasters have to adjust our prices upward. Lose some customers that will choose to buy commodity grade coffee and be fine with that. They'll go to Costco and buy their bulk bag or whatever. There will still be those specialty coffee drinkers that will pay a little bit extra. And so if it makes our profit margins work, and it's better for the overall coffee industry because now you don't have 50% of the population trying to buy 10% of the beans, maybe that system will balance itself out. But I do think it's a little bit out of balance right now. And maybe this pricing, I don't want to increase prices. That's why I haven't. No one wants to, right? You don't want to rock the boat on a system that's working, but maybe we have to, and maybe that won't be a bad thing at the end of the day.
The scary thing is it's just everywhere, right? It's every single thing. I've got three different businesses, and it's one of them we produce a lubricant. I work very hard to purchase made in the USA bottles. The little foam sealer is made by a company here in Chicago. They've got a machine with like a cookie cutter die that zips out millions of these little foam things. I buy it from them instead of China. And that little foam seal I used to pay fractions of a penny for is now pennies a piece. Hundreds of percent increase for a little thing that you peel off and you throw in the garbage. And we're trying to find more sustainable ways to do that, but kind of begs even bigger questions like and this is terrible to say, but like, should we be taking a little cherry from 5,000 miles away, drying it on the ground and shipping it across oceans so that we can cook it and drink it? And it's pretty crazy, the whole business model, actually. It's absurd in many ways when you think about it, so that you can wake up and have your cup of coffee. Makes you really appreciate it. I guess that's like the one thing. It's when I see people treat any food, my grandfather grew up in the Depression, you probably the same way, and my mother and father, like that stuff rubbed off on them. My grandfather, it took me into like my 30s to be able to not finish a plate of food. Like one day I started to realize I was getting a little chubby. But like in my head, like my grandfather said, if there's food in front of you, you finish it because you never know when the next time is you'll get a
Right.
meal.
Right.
And now we go and we buy a fancy cup of coffee. And while it's 3, 4, $5, you don't finish it. You flip it in the garbage. No big deal. Not thinking about, man, somebody picked these things, maybe even by hand somewhere, and had them spread out on a concrete pad in some hot, tropical climate. And they're scooping them up with shovels. Like the amount of work that goes into that. I kind of think about it the same way I hunt when I consume the game that I hunt. I don't just scarf it down. Like I think about some creature traded its existence for me to exist. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's not even a maybe it was picked by hand. If it's a specialty coffee bean, it's picked by hand. There aren't commercial machines that are going to go through and
Hmm.
shake trees and do that. So you have the best farms might even have a color coded bracelet that has a color profile, and they're supposed to pick a cherry that matches the color of that bracelet. I mean that's how individualized picking every cherry is because you want to get it at just the right level of ripeness. So when you look at a 2 pound bag of coffee and all those beans, you
Hundreds
might
and
you might
hundreds.
think of it as like soybeans or corn or something like that, where you've got a combine that just goes through and it's just doing this thing in mass scale. That's not the case. Every single bean, without exception, in that bag was picked by a set of fingers, a human set of fingers that decided that cherry is ripe enough, and I'm going to pick that cherry. Like it was chosen by a human being. It wasn't
That's
some
cool.
machine that went through. A decision was made that this cherry belongs in that, and so they picked it. And then you've got to get the fruit off of that, or you've got to dry it in the sun and then somehow remove that. If you're in places like Sumatra that has like afternoon rain showers and morning sun, you dry the beans for half a day and then you have to move those beans in for the afternoon showers. Every bean has so much labor that went into it, and yet we treat it as this commodity, right? I'm
Hmm.
just going to throw away these beans. But if you think of the effort that went into every one of those, you start to be a little more protective of. I'm not going to throw that. I'm going to find a use for that, as opposed to just tossing it out. So yeah, it's phenomenal to me when you think of the distance between us and that bean and the labor that went into it, and yet it is still so relatively cheap. I
Uh-huh.
mean, everything is relative, right? And we say coffee is getting so expensive, but not when you look at all of the human labor and distance that is involved in that. It's remarkable to me that we can produce the top 10% of coffee from halfway around the world and bring it to people at under $20 for a bag of coffee.
Unfortunately, we know that for that to exist, there's huge economic discrepancies in how people live. I'll be in Costa Rica in a month. We go down there quite a bit in December. Um, the area that we'll be in right now is completely underwater. They've had tons of flooding, and there's a big influx of Americans, Middle Easterners, various people moving there. So you're seeing costs of food, housing, all that stuff going way up compared to what it was. But the people that live there are still not, even though rent or a dinner is 2, 3 times what it cost 5 years ago, they are not making 2 or 3 times what they used to. And even this, I got a clementine sitting here. I was just talking with somebody about this. The fact that like you can travel anywhere. I can go to Walmart in Michigan or Walmart in Orlando or Walmart in Lewiston, Idaho, and I can find one of these. Like that it's fascinating. And it's $4 for a bag of 20 of them or
Yes.
whatever it is. It
Yeah.
is fascinating. It and we're so flippant about how we treat this stuff. I don't want to spend the whole time talking about that, but I do think it's valuable for us the end users to appreciate our food. That was kind of my point about my grandpa. I have another man, he's just passed, my nephew Canaan, who works here. His great grandfather, his name was Alois Hastreiter, lived through World War II in Germany as a child. And every time he would eat meat, he would tell us the story that if they were lucky, they got a piece of meat as big as your thumb during the war, and you would save it till the end of the meal, and then you would just hold it in your mouth because you didn't want to chew it up and swallow it. And now here we're stuffing our faces with T-bones and ribeyes, and
Yes.
it's we're so lucky to be able to do this. I guess that's maybe my synopsis on that point.
Yeah,
You got
yeah.
anything
There's
else?
no doubt about that. We are, there are roasteries that go straight to the farm and they invest in the farm and they'll make multi-year contracts with the farmers and they'll guarantee to buy those beans. And so that's one way to it's one way that a roaster can be a small part of a solution. I'm not big enough to be at that step. But one of the coffee giants in the Kansas City area actually helped me get off the ground, and that's what they did. Was they would essentially guarantee purchase of a farm's beans. And the interesting thing is that yes, you can get some exceptional coffee, but you also have to accept as a certainty that you're going to buy some coffee that isn't great. You might not otherwise buy it if you sampled it, and you just say, yeah, this one has a defect that I don't like. I'm not going to buy this coffee. You don't have that option when you sign a contract and you tell a particular farm, we're going to buy your coffee. We've invested in you. And so they find creative ways to do that coffee. I mean, you can, if you tell the story of the farm, you might find, people who will buy that coffee, flaws and all, because they know exactly where that's going. Or you can always blend a very small amount of a coffee into something like a cold brew blend or something like that, where those things that you might not have particularly liked won't even come out in the end product. And I love that model, and I would love to get to the size where we can actually start doing some of that direct work with the farms.
I hope you do.
Thanks.
Let's talk about the coffee crafters product a little bit, and we can talk about it because you own it. But drum roasting, you touched on it earlier, versus the fluid bed roasting. You could take a saucepan, put it on a stovetop, put beans in it, and shake it and move it around with a lid on it, and you'll cook those beans to something that's drinkable. I've got a background in energy efficiency design and technology, so we used to retrofit buildings from boilers to window coatings and things like that, which is why I had a dovetail to Honeywell earlier. When we burn natural gas and propane, there's a lot of nasty stuff. You talked about oil refineries that is a byproduct of the combustion process. Does that stuff end up in beans in a drum roaster?
It depends on the design of the drum roaster. So if it is a directly fired drum roaster, yeah, you're going to get those hydrocarbons and emission byproducts of combustion. And then there are indirectly fired drum roasters where those combustible hydrocarbons are heating up another element, and then you might blow air through that. So I guess the answer is it depends. You can't just categorically say if it's a drum roaster, it has those hydrocarbons.
Sure.
It depends on the nuance of, is it directly fired, indirectly fired, and then there are hybrids of that. But with an all electric fluid bed roaster, you can categorically say there are none of that because it is an electrical coil, no hydrocarbons involved in the heating of that coffee. And so it is it is completely devoid of any of those byproducts of combustion.
I dig it. People hear us talk about this, or they'll see it and they go, well, it's electric. That's not very efficient. That's bad for the environment. Talk about that a little bit.
There is something to be said for efficiency of air roasters. What I will say is, I think the main reason that an air roaster isn't as ubiquitous in the coffee roasting world is that there is a practical size limit for the roasters. There is kind of an inherent inefficiency. So the BTUs that are creating the heat in an air roaster, a lot of those BTUs are going up. But still, the cost per roasted pound of coffee for our air roasters is remarkably similar to some of the larger roasters. The problem is we just can't scale it up to a massive size. So right now our largest roaster is an 18-pound roaster. We could probably bump that up. If we do like a 3-phase version, we could probably do 25 or maybe even 30 pounds or something like that. But you have commercial roasters that are well over 100 pounds per batch. And to get something into that size, your efficiency really starts to it starts to really fall off. You could throw hundreds of thousands of BTUs of power at it, and you could roast that coffee. Civets roasters would like the original Civets roasters, and they had these huge burner elements, just hundreds of thousands of BTUs, and they had great capacity. If you look at the BTUs per roasted pound of coffee, they probably weren't as efficient as
those things look like something out of an old sci-fi movie.
Yeah, absolutely. They were built for function, not form. Yeah, for sure.
You guys created a really cool product that you don't need some crazy huge facility to operate in, as long as you've got adequate power supply. And some of these things are running off of like the same power supply that like a home dryer works off, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The smaller.
Talk about that.
Yeah. Sure. The little small 3-pound roaster, you can plug it into a 30, 40 amp dryer vent, just runs on 240 volt power. And it does. I mean, that little 3-pound roaster, it crosses the line between a hobbyist home roaster or low volume commercial roaster. And it's tough to be profitable purely as a roasting facility on a 3-pound roaster. You'll hit a point where you become beholden to roasting coffee all day long for what ultimately yields, maybe a 2 or 2.5 pound batch of coffee. But by that point, once you become beholden to the roaster, that means you've got an established volume of customers, and the justification for a larger roaster is a lot easy to make. So there are many people that buy that little 3-pound roaster. $5,000, not a small amount of money. Fully realize that. So it's not everyone's starter roaster, but there are hobbyists that will put $5,000 into a hobby, and in many cases that turns into a roasting business. They'll do farmers markets on the weekends. They establish community and get to talk about the coffee, and then it finds its following, and then it grows into something bigger.
I like that. One of the things I wanted to make sure that we shared with you guys, the viewers, I really like the disruption. This has kind of become like a business talking point the last 20, 30 years, disruptors. But legitimately, your product has really disrupted an entire market of these super expensive. Like if you go buy a 5-pound drum roaster, you're not spending $5,000 unless you're buying some, used and abused piece of equipment. What's like an average 5-pound drum roaster cost? 20 grand?
Yeah, that would seem about right. Yeah. We've always tried to be somewhere in spitting distance of $1,000 per roasted pound of coffee. Our smaller roasters are a little more than that, but if you've got a 8-pound, 12-pound, 18-pound roaster, our price points are in the ballpark of 8,000, 12,000, 17,500 for our 18-pound roaster. That's unheard of in the commercial coffee production world. And the reason for that, there are several aspects to it. We manufacture almost everything in-house. So, we've got laser cutters. We do all of the metal fabrication, our cyclones for chaff collectors. We cone roll those and weld those in-house. So everything is built in-house. So we are a direct-to-consumer wholesaler. And so we have some cost savings there. And that in and of itself just it creates efficiencies that a lot of other roasters don't have. The other thing, Ken Lathrop is the founder of Coffee Crafters, and he had
Super cool guy.
this laser focus that when I met Ken, we initially butted heads just a little bit on this. A laser focus on building roasters that were simple, reliable, affordable. All right, those three things. Everything that they did was about simple, reliable, affordable.
And you butted head because why?
Because I'm the engineer, right? So I'm the IT guy. And so when I met Ken, I would tell him everything that his roasters could do. Look at all the automation we could do, the sensors that we could add, the information that we could do. Like, think of how cool your roasters actually could be, Ken. And then he would challenge me. Like, we'd go in this circle and he would say, yeah, really cool. So you're adding complexity, you're adding cost, and you might be killing reliability on that. And the moment we kill any one of those, we've lost our way, right? It doesn't matter if we can build something really, really cool if it's constantly broken down, because coffee roasting is a production business. You can't afford downtime. So nothing can come at the cost of simple, reliable, affordable, with this bedrock of just exceptional customer service. I mean, you'll find that you'll be hard pressed to find a company that has better reviews and a customer service standpoint than Coffee Crafters. And so when I started doing business with Ken, when I started supplying my automation device to Ken, that was his biggest concern. It wasn't, is your device reliable? Does it do what you say it will do? It was, when there is a problem, how can I know that you're going to stand behind this? How can I know that you're going to support the customer? Because now, in a way, you are representing my company from a customer service standpoint. And this was years ago. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, we have the exact same approach to customer service. So I can't tell you how many customers have my direct cell phone number, and they can text, they can call. If there's an issue, it happens. We work through it. Right. You get a real human on the phone that knows the product inside and out, and you fix the problem. And so, yeah.
That's something. So a couple points on that. As I've been in business 26 years or so this year in some capacity, that is dead in the world. Everything is automated. I've got friends that are creating. One of them, he's a super sharp guy. Him and his wife have this marketing company. They're hyper intelligent. It's all AI. You go on the company. If you're listening to this, I love you. But you go on like Hermetheus coffee website and type in your problem, and it spits out answers. And it's not as simple as that. Like, they're pioneering this software. I want to talk to somebody. And maybe part of that's my age, but it's also, I don't have the time to sit in some loop of computer decision-making stuff. And I know at some point that as a company gets scaled up, it's impossible to have 40 awesome employees on the phone that know everything about everything. But like, if your model is to disconnect from the customer, I want nothing to do with that. And I have talked to 5 or 6 people at the shop there over the years, from your production people to Ken, Bryce, and it's refreshing. It's definitely refreshing. As we've taken manufacturing out of America, like in our bottling line that we have, it took me a year to find a company that made a labeler in America. I'm kind of a stickler about that. Not everything we have is made in the U.S. And there's tons of overseas products that kick butt. But like you guys, the fact that most of your stuff is all made here is pretty dang cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some components that just don't have a domestic source. So, sure. So you just have to live with that. But you source what you can domestically, and then kind of go from there.
You easily could call a million factories overseas, though, and say, hey, here's the schematics, make this. And you guys would just get boxes shipped to you with this finished product. There's a million companies that do that with anything from an electric scooter to a toaster oven. You could, but you're choosing not to. I hope you're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely going to continue that. And in fact, when Ken is retiring, all right, so it's not that he got tired of the business or it wasn't doing well. He has worked, the last 10 plus years on building this thing, and he's ready to enjoy some retirement, some well-earned retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, one of his unmovable stones in the purchase is that the company needed to stay in Idaho, and the staff needed to stay intact. I believe he had interest from another party, and the first thing they were going to do is uproot and move production to a different place, and that. I mean, it is a if Ken comes across in his 1,000 YouTube videos as this genuine humble guy, that is who he is, and his decision to sell the company to me is a reflection of that, because it's not that I was the highest bidder on his business. It's because my approach to customer service, my willingness to keep the same employees that know these products, know how to build these products, know how to support these products, keep everything in place on that. And in fact, not even come in with a big machete and say, I'm gonna flip everything upside down and do these roasters a better way. He's handed me a stable, reliable platform. The new Valenta series of roasters is a generation of roasters that can have probably another 10 years of life before the next, before we discover the next new nuance or style of roaster that we need to do. So much like my chore as a coffee roaster, don't mess up the bean. My chore as owner of Coffee Crafters, don't mess up what they have already created here. Let's make small, purposeful improvements to the product without just losing what makes them what they are.
I like that. In our training business, we've got 3 R's, and I wrote yours down. It's simple, reliable, affordable. I dig it. We train people on things that are life and death. So is it repeatable? Is it reliable? Is it robust? Which is also, something that engineers use. So I kind of dig that. It's nice to have something like it's a simple North Star to is what I'm doing the deed, the mission. I like that.
Yeah. Every year there is an annual Specialty Coffee Association Expo, the SCA Expo, and it is the event where just tens of thousands of people converge, and anyone who has any aspect in the coffee world is there. So they'll find the largest convention centers, and it was just in Chicago 2 years ago, and so they'll fill the Chicago Convention Center. And I always make a point to go visit the other roaster manufacturers that are there, just to see what people are doing. And it is fun and sometimes humbling to see the advanced technology that some roasting companies are bringing, brilliant engineers that are behind these roasters that are built. But I have seen firsthand the Achilles heel of that. So 2 years ago at an SEA conference, I was looking at this 2-pound roaster, talking to the engineer that was designing it, and I mean it would monitor your input voltage and adjust profiles based on voltage, and it had airflow meters, like it was measuring how many cubic feet per minute of airflow was going, and would make adjustments on that, and had multiple temperature sensors. Like, it was the smartest roaster that could account for so many variables that become a part of this. And I was really blown away by that. And then at next year's SEA Expo, I went back to him and I said, "Hey, how's that roaster coming?" He said, "Oh man, like it's been a challenge, because roasting is inherently a dirty, smoky, dusty, varnish building process, right? There are oils that are released in coffee roasting that turn into this varnish that sticks to everything, and smoke that coats everything, and dust that clogs everything. So the more sensors you add, works great out of the box. Like, works great on the showroom floor. Try doing it for 40 hours a week of roasting. And within 2 weeks of roasting, things are gummed up, they send bad data, and the whole system falls apart. Simple, reliable, affordable. Those three things will never go wrong. So everything we do has a focus on that.
In my years of construction, there all the old time HVAC guys, you go to their house and they've got old school 80% furnaces. And you're like, man, you got all these fancy 95, 96% furnaces. And they would take these things out of customers' homes when they do a furnace upgrade and they bring them home. Some of these guys, you'd have two or three of them lined up in their garage because they'd give them to their mother, they'd give them to their brother. And I had one. We had one in our garage that one of these guys gave me because there was literally like five parts that could fail. Of course, you got more than that, but like it'd be some super simple things that I could go to the hardware store and buy, and it wasn't some, there's no circuit boards. There's none of these like, high-end electronics. It would be very easy to diagnose and fix parts. So you always see those old HVAC guys. I got a mechanic right down the road from here, works on the highest end stuff that Ford makes for diesels. These guys all buy like mid 90s diesels, and that's what they drive with all the electronics stripped off of them. But they work on this stuff that, you can kill with the push of a button or the snip of a burned wire. I like that.
Yeah, the overcomplication of devices is pervasive. I mean, it's in the automotive world for sure, and there's almost this. In fact, I read an article that there is a resurgence of mechanics that are taking like late 90s, early 2000s Toyotas and Hondas, and they're going through replacing bushings. They're mechanically restoring these things, and they're making a fortune on it because people just want a simple, reliable, and affordable automobile to get them to work, and they don't need touch screens and a million sensors and systems that have to work together that are on new cars. All that's fantastic on the showroom floor. Try living with it for 5 to 8 years, and the smallest thing can start this cyclone of problems.
I have got a friend that I met a year or so ago. He was from I forgot what South American country. He had a multi-million-dollar roasting business with a 5 kilogram roaster. And I'm like, how did you do that? He had two shifts, and then the third shift was a cleaning and maintenance shift. So two roasting shifts, and then they let her cool down every day. Somebody came in there and broke stuff because they just ran this thing to death for like a decade. And I said, why did you never, get a bigger space, get a bigger piece of equipment? They figured out how to work it. But to do it, they literally had to budget time every roasting day because they just ran this thing to the ragged edge. They had like an inventory of parts to just keep swapping stuff.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yep.
Different ways of doing it. So which machine do you use for your roastery?
I have three. I do have a little Valenta 3. I also have, which is the smallest. I also have the Valenta 18, which is the largest. And then I have one that we call it the Franken roaster. It started life as an old artisan 6-pound roaster that then got upgraded to an XE, which was a 10-pound roaster, which then got upgraded to an XL, which is a 12-pound roaster. It's actually my workhorse right now. So my big 18, we're physically moving our roasting facilities, and so it's actually out of commission at the moment. So this Franken roaster is the one that's doing the bulk of our commercial roasting. And so it's a 12-pound roaster that's doing the bulk of that. It's staying busy. The 18-pounder can't get set up soon enough.
Okay, cool. You guys
but it's an art, but it is an artisan, the old style of roaster, and Valenta, the newer style of roaster. They both roast fantastic coffee. They do it a little bit differently, but end of the day, they're both simple, reliable, and affordable machines.
I'm having a microphone malfunction here. What is the market look like for these small machines? I call them small compared to these things that look like cement trucks. Are you seeing more people like me getting into this space, or is it folks that have the traditional drum style switching over, or both?
It's both. Coffee crafters kind of created a market that didn't exist before. So there wasn't. It's not that there was no competition in that space, but there was very little competition in the space. So 2-pound fluid bed roasters existed, but not really. There are exceptions. I mean, everything has an exception, but there wasn't really an established business model in the 3 to 20-pound range for fluid bed coffee roasters. Coffee crafters kind of created that. And so you have some built-in benefits when you create the market that you have. So the small roasters still dominate the sales numbers. And then the larger the roaster gets, the fewer sales you're going to have per month. But it is pretty consistent. That little 3-pound roaster works as kind of a gateway roaster. We even have roasteries, like not hobbyists, not home roasters, people who say, I am starting a roasting business, and they'll still choose the Valenta 3 because that's what they can afford to start out with. And you can be profitable. It will just become a chore at that point, but it's a proof of concept. Can I get off the ground?
It's like trying to run a landscaping business with a home lawnmower or something.
That's right. You can do it.
Yeah.
For a little while.
Yeah.
for a little while, and then you're
You
gonna
need
say
bigger swaths of grass getting cut.
Yeah, that's right.
I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh no. I mean, I think I made the point. It's the small roasters have the higher sales numbers. But at the end of the day, we're not selling toasters. So you're not selling something that hundreds of thousands of people are buying. Every machine is hand built, and so you're just doing a few roasters per week that are on this thing, and that's one reason that you can have a phone call with every single customer if necessary, because it's not a toaster. It's not a toaster for the person buying the machine. So if it would be unconscionable to funnel that inquiry off to an AI system or an FAQ page or something like that. Like if you're going to sell even our entry level roaster, a $5,000 roaster, if you're going to sell something that's $5,000 and aren't going to put a knowledgeable person on the phone to talk about that, unconscionable. Like you shouldn't be able to sleep at night if that's going to be your approach. And so we embrace that. I mean, our customer support and our ability to talk to the customer about the product and talk transparently. Like I'm very open about what I see as downsides of fluid bed roasting. I don't think it's the ultimate flawless way to roast coffee. Everything has pros and cons, and I'm open about what I don't like about fluid bed roasting. And at the end of the day, it still wins out for me. So, yeah,
everything's
it's being authentic.
What don't you like about? What
they're
don't
noisy.
You like about it?
You know this. They're noisy.
Yeah.
It's super noisy. You can't really have a conversation around it. The Valentas are definitely quieter than the Artisan series. And tell me again, what do you roast on?
Well, I was about to say, so we started on the little 3-pounder, which came to me secondhand. We purchased all this equipment from a guy that used to sell me coffee wholesale. We inventoried coffee with a private label that we used as giveaways. We supplied it for events that we do, and he just got sick of it. And I think he probably was one of Ken's first customers, like in the first year or two. And It's kind of funny how I came upon this stuff. He decided one day, I said, hey, I need an order. I need 100 bags or whatever it was. And he goes, I can't do it. I said, what do you mean you can't do it? Like, you on vacation? And he says, I'm sick of it. I'm done. He had another job. And it was kind of what you're talking about, where he had limited out this machine and was coming home at night, had a little workshop set up, and would then roast until 2 o'clock in the morning, and had a little assembly line for bagging. And I said, well, you're stupid. I'll come pick the stuff up. Tell me what you want for it. So I loaded my trailer up, drove down to Indiana, and bought it all. We're great friends, but I had no concept of what it was. And so I pull up and I'm like, what's this thing? Like, I know what a coffee roaster looks like, and this ain't it. And we took it home and figured out, and I can produce quite a bit of coffee on this thing. We roast a couple days a week. We're not trying to overtake the world with this thing, but we've got a really nice bagging operation and a really nice system for, look, we can go through 150 pounds of green beans in a half a day, and get it kind of stocked up in buckets to bag. And, we do that a few days a week, and life is good. We've since built out a new roasting room. We're probably going to put the 12 in there. It's something I want to talk about with you offline, but just ran 100 amps back to the back of the shop to the new roasting room to upgrade. But Anyway, that's my story.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
were.
So you know that it's kind of noisy. The Valentas are
Oh, it's
definitely quieter
super
than the
noisy.
artisan
That's
that
why
you've got.
God made noise canceling headphones.
That's right. But the coffee that you get out of it is so exceptionally clean. It's never burnt.
Hmm.
It's not ashy. It's like air roasting. The benefits of just purely I'm going to geek out, the convection roasting, the ability to change heat, like increase heat or decrease heat, like on the touch of a button. An air roaster can do that, and a drum roaster cannot do that. A drum roaster where you have this heavy steel drum, if your initial temperature on a drum roaster essentially sets the trajectory of the rest of that roast. If you don't get your initial temperature correct, it's really tough to recover for that. Because if you increase the heat on a traditional drum roaster, it's indirectly heated. So you've got to start heating up the metal drum, and that will take some time. And then that drum has to then conduct the heat to the bean. And there's this huge delay between when you make the heat adjustment versus when it starts to manifest itself on the temperature probe. And on an air roaster, I mean, as you know, if you turn that heat knob, it's seconds. You are
Right.
seeing within seconds the change that has. So an air roaster is much more forgiving, and then it's much easier to follow a profile. So if you map out in software the heat application curve for a bean, an air roaster it's like a dream to be able to follow that curve because it can
Hmm.
increase and decrease heat so quickly and easily because
Yeah.
you're heating the air in real time on the fly. There's nothing that's absorbing that heat. There's no heat sink or anything like that, that's at work.
I kind of think about it like a charcoal grill. Like if that charcoal gets too hot, yes, you can like snuff it out by closing the damper, but it's not instantaneous where it's a completely different energy source. But like I can turn down the propane or gas grill and immediately reduce the heat to my steak or burger. The charcoal, you got all this mass going and you just got to wait for it to change. Or vice versa. You need more
Great
heat.
analogy.
Now
Yeah.
you're busting the map gas torch out and trying to make it get hotter. Yeah, it is very cool. It's a common theme for us to get phone calls. Uh, why does this taste like this? Why does it like I've never tasted coffee like this? And to your earlier point, the raw green product has tons to do with it. But I think that those drum roasters impart some different flavors that are completely different than the air roasting process. And one thing we hear constantly, regardless of the product that we're using, is less acidity that people feel in their esophagus and tummy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah. The topic of acidity is always it's a hot button issue. Coffee is a chemically complex substance, probably the most chemically complex substance that we put in our bodies. So there are thousands of chemical compounds. Acidity is one aspect of that. There's chemical pH acidity, right? And that exists. And then there is our perception of acidity, which is more on the taste bud level.
Hmm.
And then even as we talk about acidic coffees, there are different acids that are in coffee, and a trained like a Q grader can differentiate phosphoric acid from citric acid, and
I
they can.
cannot.
Right, right. Nor can I. But I don't like sweeping statements where you just say air roasting means it's lower acidity
And I'm not
coffee.
saying that. I'm just saying what I hear from people.
I hear it all the time as well. Yep, I absolutely hear it. So what I wholeheartedly agree with is that air roasted coffee in general does seem to get a lot more positive feedback of this is just a really clean cup of coffee, doesn't upset my stomach. The chemistry of why that is, and that perception, it's well above my head, but it's still real because it's not just like 1 in 100 customers that says that. It's the common theme of the air roasted coffee. Like this is the cleanest coffee I've ever had. There's not the ashiness to it. There's not it doesn't taste flat or baked. It's like vibrant and alive, and it's not acidic. So all of that is real and valid, and I completely agree with it. And the chemistry behind it is something that I just can't explain.
That's what I was going to say. It's kind of like certain music. I don't know why I like it, but I do, right? Or
Yeah.
like it, it's I don't know any of the science behind it. I'm not a chemist or a food scientist, but if I hear over and over again, and I'm not telling people this, they're just letting me know on their own, well, then there's got to be some merit to that,
Mhm.
whatever it might be.
Right. Right. And at the end of the day, it's still the tool that is easiest for me to follow the curve that I need. So it's the right tool for the job. And uh, there's a lot of old information online about air roasters. There are a lot of wives' tales that we have to work against because the internet is forever. And so you have these discussions from 10 plus years ago that will say things like, well, an air roaster is great for light roast coffee, but it's not good for dark roast coffee. Absolutely false. I just couldn't be further from the truth. I've read the complete opposite of that. And so there's
Yeah,
a
I can.
lot of hearsay that is just nonsense that you have to work against on that. The technology of convection coffee roasting uh, makes it easier to produce exceptional coffee than a conduction based roasting process in my experience. I will never go back to a. Ooh, I use that loaded
Yeah,
word. Never.
that's like the
I
fourth
use.
time.
I did. I
You're
can't
never going to
envision my.
start a coffee shop either,
I
man.
can't envision myself going back to a drum roaster. What I think I would do is have multiple air coffee roasters because of the coffee that they produce.
I like that. I I'm wondering if there's pushback from like the big um manufacturers that produce these very ornate, these legacy style machines that you see in definitely the big city coffee shops, but you see all over. Like, what do they say about this technology?
Uh, my hunch is they don't even consider it. So again, when you are the size of the behemoths, when you're selling hundreds of thousands of pounds of coffee per year, like the really big guys, I'm not sure air roasting is even a possibility for that.
Hmm.
I think at
Hmm.
that point you have to fracture your product line where you have the big guys even within Kansas City that are more regional, you can find them on the grocery store shelves. But you would have to separate the line between the commodity line that's on the grocery store shelf and then maybe a premium line that is roasted on an air roaster. I don't think it's feasible to have, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's feasible to have a fleet of 15, 18-pound coffee roasters just to produce grocery store coffee. I don't know. Maybe a massive drum is the right thing for that commodity
Sure,
grade coffee, and
sure.
then your specialty stuff you do on an air roaster.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cooked, well done fast food burger. You're not, you don't need some craft beef for that if you're gonna just cook it till it's gray matter.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to give the impression that you can't roast great coffee on a drum. I'm really not saying that. You absolutely can. It's just, in my experience, it's just much easier to get consistently exceptional coffee on an air roaster. It goes as far as to say you actually have to work to get mediocre coffee out of an air roaster. Like you've
Agreed.
got to go out of your way to do that. Because like if you load your Artisan 3 with a near capacity batch, like if you put 2 3/4, maybe 3 pounds of coffee in it, and just turn the heat to 100% and just let it go. If you have a temperature probe in your beans and you're looking at that on screen in Artisan, you're going to find a very beautiful declining rate of rise roasting curve that comes from that naturally. Like
Hmm.
that is just inherent in the design of the roaster. So at capacity, even if you're not into the profiling of coffee and doing all that, just crank the heat with a near capacity load, and you'll get a very beautiful declining rate of rise and profile out of that. So in that sense, it is a very forgiving, almost brainless way to get consistently good coffee.
I like that. Just to go back a sec, I wasn't saying you can't roast good coffee, and this is not for you, it's for the listeners on the drum. I was saying like the budget grade, mass produced coffees. I was kind of comparing that to crummy fast food. That's all.
Oh, gotcha. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I digress from that point. I really learned a ton chatting with you. You've got, I wish I'd been writing them all down. You've got a lovely vocabulary of beautiful adjectives that are very positive and descriptive. That's probably your school teacher background. So my gal Bennett was 23 years as a school teacher, so she'll like to hear that you were as well. And she's got a math and science background. She's double majored in math and science and
Love it.
ran like the STEAM program. Um, it's something that, and she loves to cook, so this has been a real passion for her. I did it like almost exclusively the first couple months. Now whenever she's running, it's like way better and easier because she's a bread baker, so like she's very intuitive about what's happening. We actually don't use any temperature probes because when this thing came to me, stuff was missing. So we're kind of like running it like a old school guy on a smoker pit feel and in a therm in a therm timer. Pardon me. So
Mhm.
we're kind of just watching and working at old school. So that's going to be a learning curve for us when we upgrade to the new piece of equipment and have to start using electronics. But I'm happy to have learned that way because that'll just be easier.
Well, maybe I can get you a co-pilot that'll go right on your artisan that'll automate it for you. Just plug it into a computer and it'll automate the
Don't
heat from there.
don't rob me of I
All
like I like to do things the hard way. If
right.
folks that are like interested in branching out in business or just kind of like a closing thought, people constantly have great ideas and then they don't act on them because they're scared or don't know where to start. You've done a few things in life, and now taking over this business, buying this business, as well as starting a coffee shop. Sounds like you're not scared to take risks. Where talk on that a little bit.
I am scared to take risks. That has been my Achilles heel throughout my life. But about 7 years ago, I made the conscious decision to set those fears aside and still go forward with the things I love in spite of those fears. So yeah, it would be inaccurate to say, well, I'm not like Jason because I'm afraid to do this. Like he's just this bold go-getter, and I'm not. I can come up with 100 reasons why something would fail, and for too long I just let that paralyze me. And so yeah, like in yeah 7 years ago, I really kind of went through a reset, and I just decided um, to put the fears aside and just say yes to things. So if
What
there was
changed?
some well, I got sober. Like sobriety is actually what that was. Like that was the thing that changed in my life. Yeah, that could go down a whole different rabbit hole,
So
but that changed everything.
so you refocused yourself into a completely new direction.
Yes, yeah, in
That's
in every way. I mean, obviously the brewing went by the wayside, and I wasn't looking for things to replace the hobby of brewing in my life. Coffee naturally came in to my interest from falling in love with the product and falling in love with the process. And um and so yeah, that new focus, if there was something that I had an interest in, I was going to take a shot at it. And it takes more work than I ever would have imagined, far more work than I ever would have imagined, but it's work that I still enjoy doing. And yes, it's tiring. And no, not every day is fun, but I'm still loving the journey that I'm on, even though the day to day isn't necessarily fun. The journey that I'm on is the right journey. And so far, saying yes to those things that feel scary has always been the right choice. Even if I've hit small failures, which I have, you're saying yes to enough things, and enough things start to open the right doors, and it just works out.
I
So
like that.
yeah. To condense, it's not that it's not that I don't have the fears. It's that I'm saying yes to things in spite of those fears.
I had a feeling you'd say something like that.
Hmm.
It's hard when you get I'll say institutionalized. I don't know you well at all, but especially when you work in a career where you've got the net of uh, paycheck that shows up, direct deposit in your account, and health benefits, and the safety net of all the things that corporations or government work when you're a teacher. I'm assuming you worked for public school, but I guess you could have been in the private school
Correct.
system.
No, that's correct.
You get used to that, and it's hard for people to imagine a life without that. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Congratulations on taking that big old leap, saying yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
That'd be a good name for a roastery. Say yes. Say yes.
I love it. Yeah.
I'm gonna write that
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
Parting words. I'll ask folks when we finish these. If you never meet the people that watch or listen to us, can be about anything: coffee, sobriety, beer, the picture on your wall. What would you leave them with?
Chase your passion. Just chase your passion. Everything that I do, every robot, like even the robotic devices that I do, I trace back to when I was in high school and I built radio control cars and helicopters and learned about these things called servo motors. And then 20, 30 years later, those manifest itself in some of the control systems that we use. Chase your passions and chase them with vigor.
I like it. Another good word, vigor. You guys that tuned in, I hope that you learned something. I learned a ton, not just about coffee, but about chasing with vigor. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it. Go ahead and comment. If you've got any questions for this guy, how can they get a hold of you?
Coffee at Hermetheus.com. So that's our Hermetheus coffee.
Spell it out for us.
Sure. It's right behind. It's HERMETHEUS. Or obviously Jason at coffeecrafters.com, which is the coffee crafters side of the fence.
Very cool. As always, guys, be well. Don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them and walk a higher line. Visit our website, carrytrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.